In honor of Shakyamuni, who we call who we really are, our Buddha nature. All of us have this, though just hearing about it won't get us far at first. A few may have begun to practice because of it, but many more are likely to because something in their lives isn't the way they think it ought to be. The latter was what legend said led Gautama to abandon his life as a prince and begin to practice meditating. A popular conception is that meditation is for calming the mind. Sitting does slow thinking down, but it is better not to think of it as being good or bad, depending on how we feel about it. Even those who start sitting wanting to straighten out their lives won't end up doing it to change themselves. Rather, they will be doing what Buddha himself did. They will be sitting just to sit. You will be sitting just to sit. The problem is that our small self becomes a barrier between what we experience in daily life and Buddha nature. This self is interested mainly in taking care of itself, wanting what it wants when it wants it, but not when it doesn't. It is a source of suffering equally for those with an abundance of self-confidence and those with little of it, for those who believe in their own abilities and those who don't. Either way, in liking, disliking, or not caring about things, the small self is relying upon the three poisons of avarice, ill will, and ignorance, and in doing so is fully supportive of both the desires that feed it and the fears that defend it. It also the small self, it also lacks interest in anything outside of usual ways of thinking. What matters most to Zen Buddhists instead is believing in Buddha nature, which doesn't have such limitations and cannot be represented by any of the qualifications that we might choose to put on it. Buddha nature is not easy to define, however. It shouldn't be said that it is something we possess, since it is us who are a part of it. While to say that we have Buddha nature separates ourselves from it. It is also not completely correct to claim that Buddha nature is always with us, as this would be assuming that we and Buddha nature are not the same. A further difficulty in describing Buddha nature is that it acts like a mirror in reflecting anything and everything except itself, and so is unable to be self-defining. What is true is that we are expressions of Buddha nature. Everything being this, when we see something, we are seeing Buddha nature. What we hear or touch is Buddha nature. Though everything is, there is no way to separate Buddha nature from ordinary life, as our only knowledge of it comes from each of the things that it is. In other words, we can see form, but not emptiness. Terming this Buddha nature is fitting in that it makes a name of a specific person into the universal, symbolizing by this the inseparability of form and emptiness. Form is form, as each of us are part of the whole. Emptiness is form, as the whole can only be experienced in each of the parts. We talk of getting to Mars to continue our explanation of the unknown when we needn't go any further than ourselves. Each of us has the solution in ourselves, though without knowing it, since we only know things that can be known, and Buddha nature cannot. Nevertheless, as Buddha nature is something discovered in humans by humans, believing in it isn't like having faith in a God or creator. Trusting that there is Buddha nature does encourage us to go on making effort without any direct knowledge of it. In the religion of my youth, I would have gotten in hot water if I had asked an adult whether knowing oneself wasn't the best way to know God. Why we meditate then is to be fully ourselves. Japanese Soto Zen founder Dogen Zenji called this, as you've heard before, settling the self on the self. He also said that meditating is a sign of enlightenment, and that we don't do it to become enlightened, though that may happen, but we do it, meditation, to be enlightened. Even Dogen's understanding will not get us closer to Buddha nature. But we do need to realize and accept that it is there. It is here, has always been here, and will always be here. What we don't need is time to try to figure out Buddha nature. That time could be used to sit. Thank you, Jane. Come on over, here we go. And you have, oh, Jane's, oh, you're going this way. Oh, Jane goes that way. Yeah. I see, I got this mixed up. All right, here we go. Where I was sitting. Okay, here we go. So here we go. I'm going to change it around so we can see you guys. And not that way, though. Here we go. All right. Up here. All right, 1 second, Jane. Okay. Oh, yeah, there we go. Can't really see.
Why don't you put everybody?
Oh, I meant to do that. Something else happened. I didn't do something correctly. I got to change it again. Oh. Yeah. Oh, now I'm getting even.
Just make the whole.
I know.
You got it.
Okay.
No, you just want the gallery.
Oh, I'm the gallery, aren't I? Oh, okay. Oh, good. All right. There we go. Finally.
You got
it. And one more thing. All right. Here we go. A little bigger. All right. Okay. So, do you have any questions? I should make you guys students rather than members. And then I start across the top and ask everybody a question. So everybody would have to have a question, and Jane and I would struggle waiting for questions. But I won't do that because you are members, fellow sitters. We are all fellow sitters. That's all we are. So Jane and I are by far the oldest. Some of you who remember, do some of you remember Daichi? You remember Daichi, Spencer and Sandy? Yeah, Daichi lived here, right? Well, Daichi just called us this morning from Japan, and he made us get on so we could see him, and he finally got engaged.
So he introduced us to his fiance.
He called us right after, kind of like right after he
proposed.
He proposed at noontime, and she said yes, and then he called us at midnight. Yeah. So anyway, Daichi's fine. Daichi, for other people, Daichi was a student of mine at first. Then he went to CSUN for three and a half years, and he lived here for 4 years.
Yeah.
And he was here when the center began.
Yeah.
And Daichi was quite upset that I hadn't told him starting the center, because he felt like he's like a family member, and we should have discussed it with him. Rather,
he was like a family member. His mother and sister came over to visit us.
Yeah, we saw it. We met them, and yeah.
Now we've met his fiance, and it's really nice. So that's exciting.
Anyway, so that's the news from
abroad.
9325 Lassane Avenue. Anybody else have news?
Questions?
Anybody have questions about what's happened in the last 12 days? Spencer?
I always have questions.
I'm sorry. Spencer, I noticed Spencer first, so I'll have Spencer and then Mark.
I have a brief question.
Sure.
I was reading, somebody asked Joan Halifax if Zen was apolitical in this, can you be a Zen Buddhist to be apolitical in these times? And she said, no.
Oh, I know she said no.
Yeah, that's...
What do you say? What do you, two of you say?
I think it is apolitical. If it wasn't, you couldn't accept everybody.
Yeah.
You would have to accept this person or that. But Buddhism is inclusive.
Let's say, who should I make a Democrat? I mean, a Republican today. Well, the person whose pictures I don't see, I'll make them Republicans. So Joe and oh, Chris raised his hand to be a Republican or have a question. No, it's a good question, Spencer. And there are many Zen Buddhists, and particularly the Zen Buddhist Association, who feel very, very strongly that what Joan said. Joan is one of the strong ones in that movement, most certainly. I repeated this already this week, early this, maybe even to you, Spencer. I can't remember. No, it was in the evening, and that is that I happened to have read Suzuki Roshi. I guess last week or the week before, in which he talked about this. Of course, it was back in the 1960s, but it was the same kind of thing. And he said, if your life is totally involved in activism, then that's what you should do. Not separate from Zen Buddhism, because that's who you are. But he said, if your activism, he didn't use that word, I'm using that word, I can't remember which word he used, but if your activism is only for being active on special occasions, then you should be doing zazen. Because Zen Buddhism, and so therefore, people like Alan, who is here 2 times now, Alan Seneke, who came down to help with the ceremony, and also was here with Mel and Grace for the Mountain Seat ceremony. He's always, his whole life, been very, very much that way. Mel Weissman, on the other hand, and Jane's teacher also, Grace, pretty much that way, actually. Mm-hmm. She's always been very active. Yeah. Mel, on the other hand, hasn't, and Suzuki Roshi himself wasn't active in the same way. He would be active as a Buddhist. Okay. But all of that said, and once again, I've talked about this to others this week, from my point of view, although I don't think going out and marching is particularly useful, and I think exposing yourself to the virus would be even more foolish. But on the other hand, the last 2 weeks have been extremely educational, because if we watch TV, every Black person that we know on TV or guest on TV shows, they all now are telling their experience with being hassled, more than hassled, but let's say that, and the anxiety and fear that they felt through their lives by having to live that way. And of course, and of course, we've already known before the misproportionate figures about incarceration, stuff like that, which is totally unfair. In the past anyway, a white guy or woman, but smokes marijuana, he gets a slap on the wrist. A black one goes to jail. So it's the unfairness of it. The unfairness of it is and one interesting factor was pointed out in the past few days, which I kind of had noticed myself already, is that, but this person said, when Black Lives Matter started up, I guess 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, it was all black people saying Black Lives Matter. And suddenly it's changed around, so all the white people are saying that. That's a really, really good sign. That's a super good sign, because of course it's obviously we white people will have to change. Doesn't mean we're guilty, by the way, but now finally it's clear what should have been clear a long time ago, and we have some responsibility, and I applaud all the things that are happening. Okay? But my job, of course, I'm an English teacher and a husband, among other jobs, not a job really for being husband. But anyway, I'm also a Buddhist teacher. And my job is to teach people to, as we also read this last night, is to be completely, I can't remember his exact words. Well, I'm going to get him just a minute. No, it's not on it's on the computer, actually. Not that I need Suzuki Roshi, but I happen to remember that he said it. And it's right here. I got the page here for me. Okay. Oh, here it goes. Similarly, in our busy life, we should wear this civilization without being bothered by it, without ignoring it, without being caught by it. Okay? Without going anywhere, without escaping it, we can find composure in this busy life. And that's my obligation as a Zen teacher and your friend, to really stress that. But Jane has an answer to this.
I think it's apolitical, and because we're we're an inclusive kind of practice, and if it's not inclusive, then it starts limiting what people are worthy and which people aren't, and that's, I think, a very bad situation to get into. I think I agree with Peter that people who like activism, that's great to go out and work on it, because if that's what they can do well, that will be very helpful, because there are many difficult situations in our world. But I think still the best way to deal with this world is meditation, and I still believe when you sit, the whole world sits with you, and we have to change from the bottom up, and we can't change idea-wise down. That's what I think. So we may have changes and this and that, but I still think the emphasis of the influence of sitters and the influence of meditation all over the US now is having a good effect, as well as people who are going out and doing work outside. But that's my opinion.
And I like, did you see that news this morning? Did you see that, the street that they painted last night? You wrote the White House. You say it, Jay, this morning?
I did.
I thought that was on the front page of the LA Times, but I thought that was wonderful. Yeah, I like that way.
Oh, and last night when we were sitting, I looked on the, Insight Timer to see how many people were sitting. And it had all the marks in the US and in Europe and in India. And it was just loaded with people sitting. It was 11,000 some hundred people sitting at that point. And I thought, this is really good. This is really good. So this may be what is long-term change or real change, but the other may be what changes immediate and incredibly necessary changes quickly. But the real change can only happen, I think, by really long-term practice. That's my feeling.
Yeah, the map was
amazing.
Was quite striking.
Yeah.
U.S. was all U.S.
Was
U.S. was
black.
red or black.
Almost all black.
Europe was black, and India was black.
I know, and that's for all the dots of people who were sitting meditation at that particular time when we were sitting last night at 7. So yeah, I think that's a really good sign. I can remember when we used to look at Insight Timer and we see a little dot here and there all over the place. And now I look at it and it's just like solid black almost from so many dots. So there is a big change taking place, but it's not obvious. It's like an imperceptible change. But then, I mean, that's what we do. Nobody can stand up and take credit for it. That's the thing. You can't go in and change something and then somebody says, well done. You just sit and nobody ever knows it. So.
Mike?
You pretty much answered my question, because that's the battle I've had with myself, is that what can I do in regards to the suffering that I've been seeing, that I realize this is an opinion, but the suffering I see that I feel is unnecessary. That the police, the governments, the mayors, and all this other stuff. And I've been, really studying and reading, doing a lot of reading of Hong Po, the Chinese master, and some of the other masters, what they've had to say about form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and stuff. And I forgot one of the examples that I had read on a book of called "What the Bleep Do We Know," which is a layman's version of quantum physics. But they brought up an issue where at one time in Washington, D.C., where the murder rate was like 20%, some outrageous number back in the 1990s. And all the churches were praying, all the synagogues were praying, the Buddhists were meditating and stuff, and they dropped the crime rate dramatically. And as soon as they stopped the session, the crime rate went back up. And I forgot that was, what kind of relates to what you were saying too, in the sense that sitting can have an effect. It's just, I was so frustrated because I saw this suffering, and I just like, we've got to do something about this. And, it was staring me in the face. So I have gotten back into my sitting more and stuff, and I'm doing more intense studying, but you've already answered my question by answering that gentleman's question. It's not an easy thing to do, but Zen never was easy.
I'd like to add something which really doesn't fit to that, but I think what we can do is twofold. You may be surprised by my second fold. The first fold is, of course, when you be open and kind when you see black strangers on the street. But my second one is be open and kind to police.
Or to anybody.
Because of course to anybody. But right now it's the police versus not actually not it's that's a difficult job. And most of them are people like us. And actually they're in a difficult situation.
Both sides have the problem of people acting, for lack of a better word, incorrectly, and harming what they stand for. The police being a little brutal, the protesters being a little brutal, and they don't realize that they're both harming their side of the story. And that's, it's kind of difficult to watch sometimes.
Yeah. But of course, Jane's right. Be kind to everyone, including including the police.
Yeah. No, if Buddhism isn't totally inclusive, how can you ever hope to have any kind of peace anywhere? You can only have pockets. of it, where you think people are willing and deserving. But it's the undeserving, as far as we think, that we should particularly be open to. I can't believe that we could say somebody could enter if they're Democrat and they're liberal or they care about people, and we would close the door and somebody says, I could care less about people. That one that cares less about people is the one we ought to be opening the door to.
Chris?
Can't hear you.
Try again. It usually works. Now you're off, now you're on.
Maybe sit up.
No, I can't sit up. Not really. Yeah, your speaker should be on, Chris. You are unmuted. So
Can't hear you.
no, I'm sorry. There it goes.
Oh, there.
No, we got a sound, but not.
What's Arvin's
Yeah,
choice?
yeah. That's the sound you're hearing.
Oh,
Okay, we'll keep trying. And then if we hear your voice coming through, then we'll cut to you, as it were. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Stacy. I mean, Sandy. It's okay. She's.
type in chat. Oh,
Oh yeah, I will.
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was younger
Oh.
and going to college, I got stopped by a policeman and he harassed me quite a bit verbally and made very inappropriate remarks to me, but finally let me go. And I drove home. I lived in Palms, and I lived in an apartment building that had an alley down the center between the units. And I parked my car, and I noticed there were lights coming in the driveway. And I ran upstairs, and my window overlooked the driveway, and it was the cop. And he started shining his light on windows, and it scared the heck out of me. And I called friends. I didn't know what to do. And he ended up leaving eventually, but it was a very terrifying 20 minutes.
Wow.
And ever since then, when a policeman has stopped me for some reason, especially in a vehicle, my first thought is fear. And it's a fear that I have no control. I have to open my window and I have to talk to this person, whether I want to or not. But, I have to tell myself now that those are just unwanted fears, and I let them go. So, but still, after all this time, I mean, I'm no longer a college student, very far from it, and I still initially get that fear, and I know that it's from that one incident. But I am now able to let it go, and I've met a lot of nice cops since then. But there are some that are a little bit on the power hungry side, and it can be, for me to have this 30, 40 year experience that I'm still carrying around, I can't imagine what it's like to be Black or Hispanic or anything other than white in America, because you stand that chance of being abused by a cop or scared by a cop. And so, it's horrific for me to think of these people that have gone through this over and over and over again. They're afraid to send their kids out on the streets to school. You know, you never know if you're black or whatever, that if you go out, you'll come home alive. There's always that fear with you, and it's terrible to think that people have to live in that fear. But let's hope this changes some things, you know, that there is a major change from this unfortunate things that are happening.
That's a very good example. Most certainly.
So, thank you.
I have an opposite example. I don't mean to trivialize it, but I can't help myself tell a story here. Once this is not talking about you at all, but it's about police. One time when I was in high school, I guess my brother and I were sharing a car, and we went. I lived in a small town, and we went 4 towns over. We lived on the beach, though. We went 4 towns over to a beach party, and we were hanging around for a couple hours, and then my brother took the car. He found a girl, took the car, and I was there. It was like, you know, midnight, and 3 towns from my hometown. So I walked, and I was on the beach. So I walked down to the center of the town, and I saw that there was my father had a Ford dealership, and I saw a Ford dealership, and I said, "Oh, okay." So I went to the Ford dealership, and I opened the car door and went to sleep. And then after a while, I heard this knocking and the flashlight, and there was a policeman there. He said, "What are you doing in this car?" And I explained what had happened, you know, and he said, "Okay." He said, "Get in the car, get in my car." So I got in his car. He said, "I'm going to take you to the edge of the town." But as he drove to the edge of the town, he called a night patrolman in the next town, and he met us at the boundary of the town, and then he transferred me to the next car, who then called the guy in my town. And so at the boundary of the 2 towns there, I got in his car and he took me home. So you can have good experiences with police too. Yes.
I've got a similar story like that. I was training for the LA Marathon, and I lived in Van Nuys, and I had to go downtown and register for the race. And so I drove over to the subway station in North Hollywood, and there was no parking. So I'm speeding back to my house so that I can catch a bus back to the subway station, take the subway station to go to register for the race. Of course, I went through a speed trap. A cop pulls me over, and you're going so fast and all this stuff. I'm like, oh God, what are they going to do to me and stuff like this? And she saw my entrance form, and she goes, "You're running the marathon?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "This is your first race?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Got to remember, did you train for this?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Did you train so that you could, she goes, take a break at every mile where they have water stations, walk through it, takes one." She spent 20 minutes giving me, training instructions on a marathon like this. And she goes, "I'm sorry I have to do this to you," but she goes, "I will, recommend that you just have to take a home lesson and you don't have to go to class or anything like that." She goes, "If you do what I tell you," she goes, "you'll have a good race." And I did the race in a really good time. I listened to her advice. Instead of being, she wasn't a jerk. She spent most of the time just giving me training tips on a marathon.
Yeah.
That was it. Peter?
Yes.
You turned off my picture again.
I see. I'm wondering why.
Sandy, I'm sorry, but I had to do that because unless I do it, we can't hear you at all. That's why I did it. You can turn it back on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but when you speak, you should just turn it off. That way we have better audio.
Yeah, but it won't.
Okay. Well, I can do it. Oh, I got to go. I can click on now your audio's off. Anyway, she's going to do it for you. Huh? What's that? That's something else. That's different. June, can you turn her video back
No,
on?
I can only ask her to turn on her video.
Okay. So-
And it won't do it. It says the host asked you to, oh, now it's
There you are. Hi.
Okay,
Hi there.
okay.
Now, of course, we can't hear you anymore. Yeah. Chris, no, it didn't work, huh? Anyone else have a question or comment?
Mark, did you have a
Oh,
question?
Mark, do you have your hand up, Mark? I missed that. Mark?
No.
Are you finding yourself questionless here?
I find myself beside myself and next to Jane.
So you're seeking questions. Maybe the question should seek you.
We're waiting.
Harvey? Where's Harvey?
She's in the living room.
No, I'm actually not seeking questions. I'm looking for friends.
I'd like to hear some questions.
Anybody else have any questions?
Do you have any questions about what Peter was talking about today? Buddha nature?
I'll ask another question. Does Buddha nature, is Buddha nature suchness that this is what is everything, and that we have a tendency to confuse the small self with the big self, that we confuse ourselves with the Buddha nature, and that we just need to know that Buddha nature is there, but we can't analyze it, study it, figure it out or anything, because it's not, that's not what we do with it. We just accept it, work with it. And so that everything we're experiencing in life, whether it be good or bad, concerning what we're going through right now, that we don't blame Buddha nature, but it's just a part of Buddha nature, and that's as far.
Your voice went off. Are you still talking? Oh, you're done. Okay, yeah. You know, there's so many terms. There's big mind, there's big self, there's Buddha nature, there's enlightenment, etc., etc., etc. And they all are talking about a different aspect of the same thing. Sometimes they don't match up, saying one is the other. Right? Because, you know, for example, when we talk about big mind, I can talk about, I can talk about having big mind. You know, big mind is what you're experiencing when you're doing zazen. But I don't say you're experiencing Buddha nature. So, you know, you can also, in a certain sense, once again, this is just another metaphor on top of a metaphor, which is, you know, it's relative and the absolute. Buddha nature is the absolute, and I'm talking to you right now as a relative. So, but knowing that we have this basis to our existence, or understanding that we have it, even though we haven't made it for ourselves yet, is a very important inducement to our practice. So the other Buddhists do it in different ways, but for us, it's Buddha nature. Jane?
I'm not sure exactly how to bring this up, but I'm thinking that in Buddha nature, we assume the inclusiveness of everything. So, for example, if you attack another person, or if somebody attacks another person, they would be somebody who is attacking another person in their limited way of seeing reality. And if they're in touch with a bigger part of themselves, they would realize that they're both the attacker and the one being attacked. And so they can't step back from anything that involves them in the world in that way, because they would be both that which hurts and that which is hurt. And so if you want to experience big mind, from my point of view, if you say something cruel to another person, that person may feel bad, and you may think, oh, he deserved it or something, but later you will also feel bad because you were hurting yourself. And so we can't get away from both the consequences of a wide inclusive mind and the limited thinking of someone that believes they're separate from all things. So if we have Buddha nature, or that we're a part of Buddha nature, I think we just are Buddha nature like everything else is. And so no matter where you go, you're still involved with Buddha nature. And no matter who you meet, you're meeting yourself in some way, in another way. That's all.
Chris, you got it now?
I believe so. Do you hear me?
Yes, good, good.
I really didn't do much, but pull it out and put it in until it showed that it had a microphone. My question actually was to Peter when you were and it'll run through discussions of all when people talk about a lack of equality. In this sense, you're saying that one group of people is disproportionately punished as opposed to the other. Is the solution to that to make everybody equal and punished the same way?
No.
To let criminals off who have committed a crime and who should be.
No.
So that's, but that's a necessary question that follows.
Yeah.
You have
actually, no.
What are you upset with?
Inclusiveness doesn't mean the same.
Yeah, anyway. What is not true now, but would be nice to happen in the future, is to really just never see color.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm going to be this color, you're going to be blah, 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 but it has nothing to do with nothing. It means parents came from someplace there and your parents came from someplace there. Other than that, just don't see it. It just doesn't, there's no place where it makes a difference in your personal life. If we're all that way, then these problems will be gone.
I think if we ever get to the point where we feel like that, it's because we're just living like that. We're so involved with people, we don't think of that anymore. And for example, when we were in Japan, and we would be speaking to our teacher in Japanese, and we could also speak to him through his daughter in English if we wanted to, but sometimes we'd be so involved in speaking with him, we wouldn't even think, were we speaking Japanese or English, to get a point across. Mm-hmm. And I think you can't will yourself not to see color. You can only reach the point where it simply becomes irrelevant because your living experience is such that it doesn't involve it anymore. So I don't see how we can make ourselves not see color, but I do think that we can keep in mind that that's the direction we're heading in.
Color is culture.
Yeah.
And that's what we're saying, but it's just not true. There is no difference. I'm German Irish, and in the U.S. for a long time, and my grandmother was worked. She was had to support herself, and she worked in the lingerie counter of the local department store in a small city in Connecticut, and she was Irish. She was I guess her grandparents came, but she was Irish, and my grandfather was German. And one day, this is back in the 1950s, a customer came up to her and said, I'm going to have to leave town. And she said, oh, why? She said, the Irish are moving in.
Yeah, I'm a quarter Irish, so I have a few of those. Yeah, I'm also a quarter Norwegian, and they used to call them squareheads. But no one knows that. But they didn't get it as hard as the Irish did. But
it's the same experience. When Kennedy in my family and you know, and Jane's, I think also, when Kennedy was, you know, could become president, he was Catholic.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And I once went to, in high school, I went to another boys' club, and I had no idea about it whatsoever. And when I went there, and the boys' club was, all they were talking about was how bad the Catholics were. So it goes on and on and on, and it's got to roll to the entropy has to leave that. It's got to just stop rolling. And in our personal lives, we are very responsible in our personal lives, which is the whole world, is that we act properly. And by properly, I mean with open human hearts. I could even skip the human part.
They could say if we just get a couple million therapy dogs, it'll be all right.